welcome to our webinar entitled Staying Safe Online, Combating Cyber Risks with Open Source Intelligence. This is brought to you by Northwest's Financial Wellness Series, and this webinar is being recorded. My name is Denise Kitchen, your host, and I'm one of the relationship managers for the company partnership program. Our department manages the partnerships that the credit union has with other organizations so that they can offer credit union membership as part of their benefits package to their employees, members, and volunteers. And some of you may have heard that we just recently partnered with the Washington Commanders, so we partnered with them in this capacity as well. So it's just as a little tidbit of information. First off, thank you so much for your interest in this webinar today. We certainly appreciate you logging in. And then I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. Everybody is muted due to the number of registrants. We had over 200 people register for this, but you can drop your questions at any time in the Q&A feature, which you will find at the top of your screen. And once our presenter, Jessica, finishes, we will address them one by one. And for any questions that we don't get to address, my email address will be listed at the end of our presentation, and Jessica will share hers in the chat. Also, we will be raffling off a $25 Visa gift card at the end of our Q&A session. So you want to make sure that you stay until the very end. All right. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the amazing Jessica Stutzman. I'm sorry, I pronounced that incorrectly. Open source investigations expert. Jessica, welcome, and please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much. So my name is Jessica Stutzman. I am here on behalf of the OSINT Foundation in partnership with Denise and the Northwest Federal Credit Union. I'm here today to talk to you about cyber risks using open source intelligence, combating cyber risks using open source intelligence, which is also known as OSINT. On behalf of the foundation, just thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. A lot of folks kind of heard of OSINT, especially in the last couple of years, but they maybe don't really quite understand what it is or how it applies to them. So we're here on behalf of the foundation. Our foundation's mission statement is to help promote open source intelligence tradecraft, elevate the discipline, and help to develop the practitioner community to help advance the national security of the United States. If that's not something that's in your warehouse, that is okay, because a lot of what we do in the OSINT field applies to everybody that uses internet, everybody that exists in the real world, or if you just have stuff online that you like to do, we can talk about all of that. So hopefully everybody can see the slides. And like I said, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. I will address them once we finish up today. Quick view for our agenda. We will talk about a range of topics, including just a quick primer on what is OSINT, how it's used, why this information is important for everybody, not just OSINT professionals, various risks that you will face online, and how you can mitigate those risks. And then we'll give you some additional resources at the end of the presentation to help you stay safe online and to kind of further your learning and your education in this area, if that's of interest to you. So what is open source intelligence? We have the official public law definition on the slide for you. I will not read it. I know that can make for a very, very boring presentation. But OSINT is essentially the practice of gathering information from publicly available sources. That can be things like social media, like public records, and even just from the websites that we visit on a daily basis, whether it's on a computer or on our phone. At this point, there is even some information that you can gather from smart devices like people's refrigerators. But I promise I'm not looking online to try to see whether your milk is expired. So while OSINT is typically used by professionals to help solve major problems like national security threats or to help facilitate criminal investigations, the same principles that apply in that tradecraft applies to our everyday lives just while we're out and about, especially with how digitally connected we all are. So understanding some of that data and some of the things that we look to that's out there can help protect you from some of the biggest cyber risks that we see. There are various use cases for OSINT that you may have seen in the news over the last maybe 3 to 5 years when OSINT really started gaining a lot of ground. In Ukraine, OSINT's been used to help track the location of various Russian forces. In the crisis in Gaza, it's helped to document human rights violations for prosecution later. In Iraq, OSINT has been used to help identify the true identities of maybe ISIL members who have been using aliases online or posting, historic videos of criminal activities. OSINT can also be really instrumental in doing cybercrime investigations and background checks. So in professional settings, this is used for everything from identifying military units in conflict zones to identifying cyber criminals, finding missing persons, and everything in between. But the big takeaway for you here is that this information all comes from publicly available information that I have access to, that you have access to, that Denise has access to. And so that's what we really need to kind of take away from this. That same public data that can be used in cases like this can also be used to gather intelligence by malicious actors to help exploit innocent individuals like yourselves. This is where that awareness starts to become important for everyday people like us in our normal interactions on primarily on the internet. This does happen in situations like libraries where historically a very old source of publicly available information. But when we're talking about this today, we are talking about the digital environment because that is the most prevalent risk for us. So we'll shift to focus how understanding kind of some more principles of OSINT can be useful for you to apply to this in your own life from a digital perspective. The same data that powers that OSINT, social media profiles, public records, online activities, can be used against you by hackers, stalkers, scammers, general bad guys that are trying to do bad things. So monitoring your digital footprint is really important. Doing things like searching and removing your personal data. Being aware of current cyber tactics like phishing and doxing helps you recognize threats before you fall victim to those. And that is going to be the primary focus of our presentation today, is talking about some of those real world threats and how we can recognize them to make sure that we do not become victims ourselves. Even simple actions like doing a reverse image search can help you check and see if something like a private photo has been leaked. Maybe you're a copyright holder. Maybe you have copyrighted material that's being shared illegally. OSINT technique can help us find all of that stuff as well. So by understanding some of these concepts, and especially by understanding what the cyber risks are and how those cyber threats are perpetrated, you can recognize vulnerabilities you may have and make informed decisions to help protect yourself. So if you're still like, well, I don't know about this, there are a lot of real world consequences, and we'll visit those briefly. Failing to protect your personal data online can lead to very serious consequences like identity theft, financial loss, safety risks, and emotional damage. Hackers and cyber criminals use public information to steal identities, to launch phishing attacks, to become catfish. I think there's been some Netflix specials about different catfish situations. People pose as females or males when they are not, truly trying to gain romantic relationships, will gain romantic relationships with people and then exploit them for financial gain. Very, very emotionally damaging for those people. By being proactive, limiting what you share, and understanding how your information can be used, you can make yourself more protected and help avoid a little bit better to keep yourself from becoming a victim. So again, your personal information can be stolen and misused, cyber crimes, reputation problems. So this isn't just an abstract problem. And we're going to take a look really quickly at some of the numbers from 2023, which is the most recent year that we have like a full set of data on. There we go. So in 2023, it was estimated that over $12.5 billion was lost to various cyber crimes just in the United States. This is not a worldwide number. This happened just inside the United States of America. Globally, there are estimates that total cost of cybercrime reached $8.15 trillion. And that is an estimate, and it often takes years to figure out the true damage that was caused by some of these incidents. So it could be higher, it could be a little bit lower, but either way, that is a lot more money than probably any of us will ever see in our lifetime. But that is just money that's being stolen through various criminal enterprises. There were 880 plus cybercrime cases reported to the FBI in 2023. Not everybody that becomes a victim of a cybercrime reports this information to the FBI. We do have a reporting link at the end of the slide deck that will show you in the event that somebody that's been targeted or that has had a situation has not reported it. But a lot of these are likely to be higher numbers than they are because many people do not report, whether it's because they're embarrassed or because they just don't understand what actually occurred. There were 3,200 roughly data breaches in the United States. Those are large scale data breaches that impacted more than 353 million people. Now, those are 353 individual persons, which is almost the population of the United States, if not, a little bit more. Some people may be impacted by more than one breach. I know personally this year, at least, I've had, I think 5 or 6 different notifications of my email address or some sort of personal data being involved in a breach. And I'm sure that many of you have seen that as well. So these crimes happen every day, and they're not just happening to large organizations and large enterprises. All of this stuff happens, and it's going to be relevant for us. So we'll walk through the different types of cyber threats that we should really be aware of, because these are the most popular ones that target the highest volume of people. We can see cybercrime was expected to skyrocket from 2018, and it has continued to grow. And we continue to expect that to grow. So the most common cyber threats, like hacking, phishing, and ransomware, rely on gathering personal data. Attackers piece together little pieces of information that are public to make it so that they can identify who you are, make their attacks more convincing, and make it harder to spot that there is something weird going on. These threats are not just targeted at large companies, like we said, they're aimed at anybody with a digital footprint, relying from internet users at the individual level to schools, to small businesses, to large businesses. The methods that attackers use often rely on that publicly available information to start, and then they continue to find other information and exploit weaknesses. So the more you're aware of this, the better equipped you are to protect yourself and protect your personal information. So the first one that we're going to talk about is hacking, and we will walk through each one of these trends step by step to kind of just get a high-level overview of how they happen and look at examples from each of these. There we go. So we'll start with hacking, which you are probably most familiar with. This is something that's been around for a while, even though the internet wasn't maybe the biggest thing for a while. When I think of like 80s movies, I think of, you know, that hacker in the dark room on an old school computer with like just bright green text everywhere, you know, and the FBI comes banging through the door. That's usually what we think of when we think of hacking, right? But it has expanded and gotten a lot more interesting since then, and a lot bigger and broader, and a lot more subtle in a lot of its interactions. So cybercriminals typically target corporations, government agencies, and high net worth individuals to steal valuable data, their intellectual property, or just funds. What's critical to understand with hacking is that hackers often get public information, things like emails or like passwords, from online activity to exploit system vulnerabilities. So by limiting the amount of personal information you share online and ensuring you use really strong, unique passwords, you can reduce your risk of being targeted. Now, there's some nuance in whether somebody discovers your password online and then they log into your account. Is that hacking? Well, they had the password, but they didn't have authorized access. So yeah, I would still consider that to be hacking. But hacking is something that in this case can happen to you even if your passwords are just out there online. So if you see that you've been in a data breach, go ahead and change the passwords of those accounts and don't reuse your passwords. We'll talk more about risk mitigation strategies across the board a little bit later though. So right now we'll move and look at another common threat, phishing. And that's another way that people find more personal information or get people to give up their personal information. It is phishing with a PH. It's a technique used to deceive people into providing sensitive information, things like passwords or financial details, by pretending to be a legitimate entity like a bank or a service provider. I see this most often with banks. Attackers will send emails or messages that look official, but if you look a little bit closer, there's usually a bunch of red flags that you can find. Things like misspelled domains, so the website is incorrect or the website looks wrong compared to what you know to be correct on a regular basis, or there may be suspicious attachments. These scams also often target people who maybe aren't super tech savvy who aren't aware that maybe a bank wouldn't email you to get your password from you to verify your information. So always verify your sender before clicking any links or downloading any attachments. So if you take a deeper dive into OSINT techniques later, you can learn about how to check domains, how to cross-reference different contact information to make sure messages are genuine. So I'll show you on the next slide an example of an actual phishing email. So this is a very classic example. And if you've ever looked at your spam box, most emails are pretty good. I think they get like, I know from one of my accounts, it's probably like they get 90% of the spam emails and the phishing emails that come through, but once in a while, one will be disguised very, very well, and it will still get through and look like it's an Amazon email or something from a banking institution. So in this case, we can see that the email appears to be from Bank of America, the name that's displayed, and then we see it's actually from a crvvgi@comcast.net. There is no circumstance where any bank is ever going to send you an official email communication not from a banking email. So this is red flag number one. We also see that if your bank is sending you a notification about irregular activity on your account, which is the subject here, they're going to send that only to you. They're not going to send it to an entire list of people of undisclosed recipients. That is another really common tactic. If you see that you get something from maybe a bank or from Amazon, or I think the Geek Squad from Best Buy is another really common scam. And you look and there are like 15 people CC'd in the email, and usually it's like several hundred. That is a very good indicator that that email did not go to you alone, and that's a really good indicator of a scam. You can also see here that they have a please sign into your account, and they have a hyperlink. If you were to inspect that hyperlink, you can right click on it to actually see where it goes beforehand. You can see that it leads to a different address, not bankofamerica.com. That is likely a replica of bankofamerica.com. And if you were to put your email address in, put your password in, they would take that information and then they can gain access to your actual Bank of America account and just rob you blind. Unfortunately, this happens a lot, but if you know what to look for and know not to click on links in emails and know kind of how to interpret some of this information, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. There's all kinds of other red flags here. We see commas, we see improper grammar, we see a member instead of an appropriate title for yourself, your name or something like that. And then, like we said, just lots of grammar issues. This also was an older version. This was sent in 2014, so they did have a fake copyright there, but you learn to kind of evaluate those things. So this is a good example of phishing, and we'll move on to take a look at ransomware, which is a type of malware designed to block access to your system unless and until you pay a ransom. Ransomware is one of the most dangerous forms of cybercrime, and this is something that does get a lot of media attention because ransomware often targets bigger organizations like the oil pipeline that happened a few years ago, or like hospitals, or medium to large sized other types of businesses where their data access is super important. Individuals can also fall victim to this, especially if you don't have strong cybersecurity measures in place, or if you don't necessarily vet the websites that you go to. So it shuts down entire systems until a victim pays a ransom. It can be spread through phishing emails or by exploiting weak security in different software programs. So one of the ways you can protect yourself here is to make sure your systems and software are always updated. You have the ability to keep yourself protected from vulnerabilities that way. Do not download files. Do not download attachments that come from people you're not sure of who they are. And don't click on links from untrusted sources, sort of like we saw in the phishing example. Maybe that phishing example, instead of that link being a replica of Bank of America's website, maybe that was going to start an auto download process and put ransomware on your computer. Now, there are a lot of really advanced scams in the ransomware community. I taught an OSINT class last year, and we had just put the students online, and the student went to go connect to a website, and all of a sudden we heard this mechanical voice coming from his computer. And it was the most calm thing I've ever seen. The gentleman next to him crossed his arms and he leaned back and he said, I think he's got ransomware on his computer. And I was like, okay, let's take a look at this. I've never had that happen in like 35 seconds before, but let's take a look. And what it was not a ransomware attack at all, but it looked like one. And what it was a pop-up ad on a web page that the gentleman had gone to. And the pop-up ad took over the web page and started demanding ransomware. It gave a QR code for a Bitcoin address and wanted him to scan and give that Bitcoin address a bunch of money so that way he could get his thing unlocked. Now, in this instance, it was as easy as closing the browser, clearing the cache, clearing the cookies, and making sure that he was reset. We were able to confirm that it was not, in fact, a ransomware attack. However, that could have led to an actual ransomware attack. Had he scanned the QR code, had he tried to give more information to pay that ransomware that wasn't actually there, that could have projected further into an attack that had actually taken over his entire computer. So it may not be ransomware. It may just be another kind of a scam. Either way, don't click on links you're not sure of, and be careful with pop-ups. If for some reason you think that happened and you can still close and move your mouse around, it's probably not a ransomware attack. So an example of what this might look like is here. This was an example of a fake DOJ and FBI attempt of somebody to identify themselves as FBI and DOJ. They had identified that there was all sorts of inappropriate illicit activities here, trying to scare somebody into saying, hey, give us this money or we're going to send this information, we're going to come arrest you. So this is an example of kind of a typical one, what it might look like once it infects your system. It displays a message that demands payment in exchange for access to your files. It'll give you areas to put keys in, and it'll say that only if you give money to them will you get the keys back. You can see that it's email at us at fbifine@protonmail.com. I can pretty much guarantee that the FBI is not using Proton Mail accounts to collect fines from actual people, and that if you were really guilty of those things, they would not be coming to you on a computer. They would be knocking at your door. So Probably unlikely that you will have these if you are using good hygiene on the internet, but it's good to see what this looks through. So protect yourself. One, if you do have a ransomware attack, you can protect yourself preemptively by always backing up your data. Always have a good hard copy of everything. Maybe you do that on a weekly backup schedule. If that happens, at least then if for some reason you do get infected with ransomware, you have everything you need and there's no motivation for you to pay that ransom. There is no law against paying ransomware fines in the United States or ransomware demands. That is kind of subject to a little bit of contention. There's a lot of discussion whether that should be illegal or not, because all of that money goes back to criminal enterprises and they commit, these types of things are happening all over the globe. Just because this is happening in the US does not mean that the cyber criminals exist in the United States. They may be in a foreign country. So there's a lot of kind of discussion about that. It is not illegal to do it, but we highly recommend that you just protect yourself in advance so you do not ever have to deal with this and do not ever have to think about paying a ransomware operator. So now that we've kind of looked at how ransomware operates, we're going to move on to a little bit of a different threat, and that is online stalking. So that is another way that people take advantage of your personal information online and use that against you. It is a very big growing concern in today's digital age. It involves using the internet to harass, monitor, or track somebody's activities without their consent. Stalkers can use platforms like social media, email, and messaging apps to try to track their victims. Goals there can be anything from just harassing people because they're online trolls. Some people just really enjoy bothering people online. If there's a psychologist in the audience, please inform us as to why that might be. I don't know. But it could be also to intimidate people they know, to cause fear, to cause emotional harm, to cause reputational damage, things like that. Victims a lot of the time are people that can be public figures, but it could also be anybody that shares personal information online. I've known people personally that have had somebody stalking them online. Maybe they met somebody once and that person just really kind of attached to them. There are so many different reasons that this can happen. Victims of domestic abuse or in personal relationships can also be highly targeted for things like this. So we talk about this happens because you're very visible on social media, email, and messaging, maybe things like that. People know where you are so they can follow you. This is not the only risk that comes from that, right? So Home Alone is a great example. The family in Home Alone, the very first movie, had told people they were going on vacation. They told the fake police officer that they were going to be leaving and the house was going to be empty. Same concept. They told him in person. He knew the house was empty. He could go and try to rob the house. He didn't know little Kevin was going to be there, home alone, causing all kinds of problems. Same kind of concept here. If you're going on vacation, do not tell people you're going on vacation. You want to post pictures? Post them after you're home already, because that will make it a lot more difficult to figure out where you're at and what you're doing. So that can kind of help you prevent that a little bit. Now, there's another type of online stalking that kind of happens through using mobile apps, where people have access to different apps and platforms that can violate your privacy and grant remote access to things like your video cameras or your location in real time. There have been some articles that have come out about this. This is not super common. Most of these apps are designed to give parents the ability to have oversight of their children, but these can be misused. I think the last time we did a talk like this, somebody had asked, well, how do I know if there's an app like this on my phone that's tracking me? One of the best ways you can do this, especially if, because you can hide apps in different places, check your battery settings. Your battery will often, I know in iPhones for sure, and I'm pretty sure in Androids, although it's been a couple of years since I've seen an Android, you can look at your battery life and see what apps are using up that battery. Even if an app is hidden on your phone, that type of data will still show up. So if you're ever not sure what is going on with your phone, you can take a look and see what's been pulling your battery. It will even show you what an app just running in the background is affecting your battery. So even if you've never opened that app, it still has something going on in the background and it's consistently pulling data. You can go ahead and check that and see it there. There's a couple other ways you can do it that are more on the level of like doing forensic examinations and things like that. If for some reason you feel that that is your situation, please reach out. I'm more than happy to help with that. Nobody should be monitored that does not want to be monitored. But if you do need to monitor your children, there are apps and platforms out there that can help you do that, which I guess is a plus side to this. So we'll talk about doxing next. Doxing is a malicious act of publicly sharing somebody's personal information, like an address, a phone number, or an email address without their consent. Common targets for this are activists, journalists, public figures, political figures. police officers and like law enforcement officers in a lot of situations as well, particularly when they're undercover. Blowing their cover can kind of, invalidate a lot of criminal operations. And of course, there's a huge benefit to a criminal enterprise in doxing those persons. So the key point is to harass or intimidate that victim of doxing by exposing the private details to a larger audience that can lead to physical threats, emotional harm, or danger. There was a sort of a more extreme version of doxing called swatting, and you may have seen this in the news in the last few years. I think the incidents of swatting have died down a little bit, but they do tend to get a little bit more extreme around like election years because there's just a lot of controversy. So swatting is taking this a step further. The person identifies where somebody lives, and this originated in the video game world somehow. They'd identify where somebody lives and then call in a fake threat to the local police department or to the FBI or somebody of that nature and say, hey, this person has hostages. They're threatening to kill everybody. They're threatening to harm people. And you need to go and send a SWAT team that they need help. So a SWAT team will arrive at the house and the person, of course, is very, very surprised, does not know that this is happening. And we've actually seen people that have been killed accidentally as a result of these swatting incidents. So doxing ranges from, essentially harmless, just sharing information and maybe nothing ever comes from that, all the way up through very, very serious harm to the persons that have been doxed and to all of the people involved, because that can create very dangerous situations. So be very careful about what information you make available online, right? We've talked about this in all of these other pieces. Watch out for what data you put online. If you know that your house is something that's public, you can request that that information comes down. If there's a website that shares your personal information that you did not grant it permission to do, you can request that that information be removed. You can do a lot of these things, especially in the United States. It's really great that we're here because we have the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Again, if you have copyrighted information that you want removed, you can have that taken down. And you have the ownership of your personal information. So if your stuff is somewhere and it shouldn't be, and you want help getting it taken down, please reach out. I work with a lot of people to do that, and it's a very, very useful thing, especially if you are subject to this type of behavior, or if it's happened before. So doxing kind of leads us into another one of those issues that can be very, very serious and expand in a variety of directions. And that but first we will take a look at an example of this. So this is just a fake example, fake tweet by a fake hacker. And this may be what that looks like. Sometimes it may be taking something like this and stapling it to telephone poles in a town, if it's maybe a law enforcement officer that's being doxxed, or if it's a local politician or something of that nature. So they may give a copy of an identity document. They may just post information like this and saying they live at this location. So sextortion is when somebody threatens to release sensitive, private, or sexually explicit materials unless a victim complies with their demands. Those demands may include things like money, sexual favors, or more compromising content to use to then extort more funds out of that person. Most often, this comes down to being a money thing. People will pose as individuals and match with people, especially teenagers. Unfortunately, teenagers are one of the biggest, teenagers and preteens are one of the biggest targets of this. Because they don't know better, really, a lot of the time. They don't know that people are going to scam them online. They don't know that the pretty girl or the very attractive boy is not who they say they are. They have a lot of trust. So that trust gets violated. They may or may not share explicit content, but the person on the other end says, hey, I have this explicit content of you, and or I know about this thing that you said, and if you don't pay me this, I will tell your family, I will tell your friends. There is a really awesome person. Take a look for him on LinkedIn if you can. It's Paul Raffile, Raffile. He has been one of the most pro anti-sextortion folks out there. He has been working to get Instagram accounts to be a lot more restricted for teenagers and to get Meta and all of these different industries to act to try to protect teenagers and children in these situations. And he's having a lot of success. It's a lot of back and forth, but the more attention that gets drawn to this, the better. There have been, I think, something around like 20 to 30 children that have taken their own lives after being sextorted because they just could not understand what to do. And they were that terrified. So this is very, very serious. And if you have young children, explain to them that this can happen. So they are aware. Kids are often targeted on platforms like Snapchat, where you can just look up somebody's user handle and start interacting with them and messaging them. Instagram, Facebook. Well, Facebook isn't really for teenagers anymore, I guess. I guess maybe I'm old to think that still. TikTok, things like that, stuff that the younger generation is using to communicate. So this, whether it results in they lost money or they didn't lose money, this can have a really huge emotional and psychological impact. The victims are going to usually feel very trapped, very isolated. They're not going to be sure where to turn or what to do, or what next steps to take. So the more open communication you can have about this type of thing, especially if you have teenagers, young adults, preteens that are having relationships or online or working with cell phones, having cell phones on themselves, it's better to just have these conversations openly and make them aware that if this happens, they can come to you, because that is the best way to protect them in these scenarios, other than obviously moderating what apps they have and things like that. So we talked about a lot of things that sound really, really scary, but the goal of this is not to scare you, I promise. It is to inform you. You can avoid being victimized by all of these different types of crimes with a bunch of like pretty simple footprint strategy, or pretty simple strategies here. The first one is to be aware of your digital footprint. Be aware of the information that you share online now and the information that you've shared online in the past, because a lot of that stuff still exists. Even if you haven't logged into your Facebook account in 5 years, that does not mean that it's necessarily gone. That information may still be there, and there may be information there that can be used to find you. Think critically about a lot of the stuff that you're seeing come in online, whether it's these scam text messages, which we didn't talk about, but those are just as bad as the emails. You'll get a text message from the US Postal Service and it'll say, oh, your package delivery was delayed, respond here. And then it's a link, and it's definitely not a link for the Postal Service. Those things are not happening by text message. So think critically about this stuff. Question whether emails are legitimate, question whether texts are legitimate, and requests for personal information. If somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm the CEO of your organization and I need you to send me $100 in gift cards for this thing right now, hang up and then call that person by the number that you actually have and check in with them to see if that's the case. If somebody that you know, or you think you know, claims to send you an email but from a weird place and says, hey, I had to change my email because of this, call them or reach out to them by the contact information that you have. If a bank claims to call you, hang up and call the phone number on the back of your debit card or the back of your credit card. Very, very simple things, but just it's hard to think about that in the moment, but try to remember to think critically there. Safe browsing practices. Avoid suspicious websites. Be careful when you're downloading files. Be careful when you're clicking on different links and things like that. Try to know what you're looking at. There are some websites out there that you can go and have scan a certain website for a virus or to see if it's legitimate or not. And those can be really, really useful. Software updates. Keep your devices updated to prevent against vulnerabilities that cyber criminals can exploit, whether it's your phones or laptops or even refrigerators, smart devices who are sold by Amazon and whose name I will not repeat because I have one sitting here and I don't want her to turn on. Those things have software updates, and they usually keep themselves up to date, but it doesn't hurt to check in your apps and make sure that they are in fact updated properly, because there has been some really interesting things historically that people have been able to do when they hack those devices. Two-factor or multi-factor authentication. That is the classic, we're going to send a 6-digit code to your phone, or we're going to send a code to your email, and then you have to put it in. That is one of the best ways to protect yourself. Even if somebody gets your password, unless they have hands on your phone or have access to your email account as well, they will not be able to get that code. If somebody says, hi, please give me this code over the phone, or texts you and says they need the code, do not give them the code. Every text that comes through with one of those authentic codes will say, please do not give this code to anybody. We will never ask you for that code. Trust that message and do not give them that code. You can have it set up for phones and for emails. I would recommend doing both. That way you have a backup in case one does get lost. And then again, make sure you're checking your passwords and making sure that they have not been compromised. Privacy settings. Regularly review and update your privacy settings on social media and on other platforms that you use. Zoom will have different privacy settings than Microsoft Teams. I had some sort of an application that was something like a Word. I think it was like Microsoft Word or something, but for some reason it had accidentally turned my camera on while I was writing. and it had something to do with a plugin that I was using where I was trying to record myself doing a presentation. And so I knew that I had that privacy setting on, but I didn't give it permission to turn on and record me while I was doing it. It appeared to be a glitch, but I went through and double checked all of my stuff after that to make sure that it was in fact just a glitch with that program versus an unauthorized access attempt. So strange things happen and they're not always nefarious, but know how to follow up on those things when they do. And then reporting mechanisms. We have in a couple slides, some places you can report different things, like we said, reporting to the FBI. It's IC3, the Internet Crimes Complaint Center, I believe. It's a great place to report if you are the victim of any type of cybercrime. There's a lot of other reporting mechanisms. If you need guidance in what reporting mechanisms to use where you live, please reach out and let us know. We can help you figure out what those are. Every state, every county, every locality, towns, districts, etc., are all going to have different requirements for reporting and different structures for reporting. So we can point you in the right direction depending on where you're located, but it's hard to do broad more than just IC3. And then create strong passwords. When it comes to password strengths, the thing that makes them the most strong is the length. The length makes strength for passwords. If that's all you remember length makes strength. The longer your password is, the harder it is to compromise. So use a combination of capital and lowercase letters. Use numbers, use symbols, use a space here and there. But the longer your password is, the better. I think based on the last rainbow table I saw, which is a really nifty little table that shows kind of how long it would take to crack your password with a password cracking mechanism based off of the number of characters in your password is. I think if you're over 16, you are good. That password probably cannot be cracked mechanically within like the next 7 million years. And the number may actually be much higher than that. That being said, it does not matter how long your password is or how complicated it is if that password is part of a data breach. So just because your password is really, really good does not mean it will not get leaked online. And if that happens, then you will need to go ahead and change that. Google is really great at notifying you when passwords have been breached. Apple devices now tell you, hey, this password was exposed in a breach. It may not necessarily be your password that was exposed in a breach. So if my password is just, the office, right? It's a coffee mug with Dwayne on it, or Dwight. Sorry, I work with somebody named Dwayne. I get them confused all the time. If my password is just the office, maybe my account was not breached, but I'm going to get a notification because the password the office appeared in a data breach somewhere. If somebody has had a list of exposed passwords, they can use that to try to shoot them at your accounts to see if those accounts have used those passwords. So it may not necessarily be your password specifically for your account that was compromised, but you will get notified if your password has appeared in a breach somewhere because it can then be used against you. So change your password. I know it's super annoying. Get a really good solid password. I believe that NIST has updated their frameworks and they recommend that you do not change your password every 3 months now. They recommend that you just find a really, really good password and use it in one place only. And as long as it's not breached, you just keep that password. That is far safer than changing your password. Oh, I forgot my password. I have to change it again. Let me make it something more simple, or let me reuse it across different places. So create strong passwords, please. Change them when you see that they've been breached. So with these strategies in mind, you are a little bit better equipped to protect yourself from a bunch of the cyber risks that we've talked about, but there's still a bunch of other resources that we want to put out for you guys. And what I will do is copy and paste these into the chat here. Wow, those links turned really big. Sorry about that. There we go. So the first one is National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We call that NCMEC. They have a bunch of great resources for how to keep your children protected, whether they're very young or those preteen, teenager years, to how to talk to your children about different things, how to prevent cyber stalking, and just a lot of different resources you can use to educate your children in that regard. The Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force also has really good tips and tricks for internet safety. They are called ICAC. NCMEC and ICAC are also not national, but so they're in the United States. It's a combination of local law enforcement, state, federal law enforcement, and all of these different agencies that work together to prevent children from going missing and being exploited and to help return them and prosecute crimes against children. So both of these are really great resources. That is what they do day in and day out. And they're people that just care about making sure that this stuff doesn't happen to you and to your families. The CISA also has really good awareness resources for parents and for educators in the cybersecurity space. And then if you want to learn more about doxing and see some just really good other like detailed information about some of the stuff we've talked about, there's a great CNN report on doxing. There is the ICE page, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement piece on sextortion. There is a RAIN publication on cyberstalking. And if you are a parent or you deal with children, the one that I would say without a doubt, please go watch is the Deutsche Telekom Without Consent. That is a video showing that a lot of folks have grown up with social media and we're used to documenting and putting our lives on things all the time. And then those people that grew up with social media and were very used to doing this have had children. And now they're posting pictures of their children online and capturing the lives of the children online. And that just kind of shows what can be done with some of that content of your children and how that will follow them through their lives and put them at risk as they kind of go to create their own digital footprints. So highly recommend watching that one. It is a very powerful video and really speaks to kind of what can be done with online content in a way that's kind of very, very scary. So I would say that if you are a parent, give your children the ability to make the decision of putting all their stuff online when they are fully grown. If you're going to share that stuff with like friends and family, at least keep your accounts private so that it's not all out in the world for people to see. And then if you would like to reach out, you can reach out to the OSINT Foundation at osintfoundation.com through the contact us page. You can reach out to me, Jessica at pangearesearch.io, or through my website, pangearesearch.io. There is no www ahead of that. And oh, I think I saw a hand raised. So that was it from me. We will take questions, but I see Denise here, so I'm going to let her take over for a second, and then I think we'll get back to that.
Sounds good. So here on this slide, you see our team, the company partnership program team, and I'm actually missing a team member here that was just recently added. So I need to update that slide for you, Jessica. But you can always also reach out to us, of course, if you have any questions, especially when it comes to how Northwest handles security, et cetera. One of the things that I wanted to mention real quick is that Northwest uses multi-factor authentication. So if you guys bank with us, and you have that activated, then we will send you a code when you log in to your online banking and your mobile banking, et cetera. So that is one way for us to keep our members safe. Another thing I wanted to mention that Jessica spoke about is the multi-character passwords, right? We all hate them. They're so long. But one of the pieces of information or a tip I received from one of our security specialists is make it a phrase. Right. So if you have a long password, make it something, you know, like, I don't know, I love Lucy or I love the show Friends, something like that, right? That can't be easily guessed. It's a long password. And like Jessica mentioned, include lots of characters and numbers, et cetera, to keep it safe. All right. So I looked at the Q&A. We don't have any questions in there. So I kind of have a feeling that people don't necessarily have access to it. So if you don't see the Q&A feature on the top of your screen, please make sure you use the chat feature to ask us questions. And one of the questions I received here is from Janet, and she's asking, I checked my battery activity and see an app, One UI Home. What is this and how can I remove it if it's something I don't want? So because this question came in a few minutes ago, I did some searching here on my website or on Google, and it's actually looks like it's a interface design concept, a user interface design concept for a home screen or dashboard within an application. So it could be navigation bar, widgets or cards, quick actions, et cetera. So it doesn't look like it's any kind of threat. Jessica, what do you know about this?
Yes, so that is correct. So the One UI Home is the one user interface home, and it's actually an essential system component for Samsung Android devices. So it is the default launcher that is baked into that hardware that helps manage the home screen, app icons, widgets, and things like that. So that is nothing for you to worry about at all, but awesome for looking into that and trying to figure out what that is. That's one of the biggest things about this, and one of the things that I love the most about OSINT, is you do not have to be in this profession. You do not have to be an expert in everything. You just have to know how to find information when you can't figure it out or when you don't know it. And so that's really awesome. But yeah, so that is, it's a Samsung, a default system component, nothing to be concerned about there. And then I
Excellent.
see a question from Bob MC. How safe are password managers? And that is a fantastic question. So password managers, and I'll speak broadly at first and then a little bit more specifically. Generally, they are very safe and highly effective for managing your passwords. And they have some advantages, especially when it comes to security and convenience, but there are still risks there. So they're usually encrypted pretty strong, usually like an AES 256 encryption to store your password securely. And they're only accessible with a master password that hopefully you know. As they go, down, they can also help you generate really strong passwords. They can do autofill, but store it internally rather than in a browser. And they're going to have a lot of the times end-to-end encryption, so the data as it's being transmitted between the app and between your device, whatever device you're using it on, is going to be encrypted. And so no one can intercept that traffic and then grab your password. They also usually have that multi-factor authentication that we talked about. Now, there are some risks to using a password manager, and that is that if that password to the password manager becomes compromised, that is now a single point of failure and all of your passwords are exposed, right? So I would say if you have a password manager, treat that single password that unlocks it like gold. I love that Denise mentioned about the phrase instead of a password. That's something that I think we'll see being moved to in the next couple years, using pass phrases. I saw a couple articles about this recently. And if you have ever done anything with cryptocurrency, and I don't know what the Northwest Federal Credit Union, if you guys deal with crypto at all, but when you have cryptocurrency, it is often your wallet is protected by a passphrase, and it is like anywhere between like 16 and 24 individual words that are in very specific places and very specific orders, and you cannot access that money or that wallet without inputting that entire series of phrases, just like a paragraph of data. And those are extremely highly secure. So again, other than being a single point of failure, there's potential things like phishing attacks, like data breaches that can impact you. So there was one very recently, I think, that had a data breach. I'm trying to double check and see which one that was. But what's important to note about that one is that even though they did have a breach and some of their information was leaked, the passwords to the password managers were not leaked. So those passwords were also secure. But LastPass, I think in 2022, was breached. And then Norton had a password manager leak as well. So what I would say about that is the last piece on specific ones is if you're going to use a password manager, either use something very well known and like reputable, like OnePass or Bitwarden. I think those are both pretty good ones. And Proton Mail. So the folks that run Proton Mail, it's a Swiss organization. They have proton.com. They have, I think it's proton.com. They have like a Proton VPN. They have all like file sharing and cloud systems and stuff like that. At this point, they're growing a lot. They have a password manager as well, and that should be very secure. So if you're going to use a password manager, if you're going to use a VPN, if you're going to use any security programs, look into who the owners are ahead of time so you kind of understand who they are, what the risks may be. I probably would not sign up for a password manager if that company was housed in like China or North Korea or Russia or something crazy like that. So kind of use your best judgment. And if it seems like it's a little sketchy, find another one that maybe seems a little bit safer.
Great. Okay, another question we received is from Rodrigo, who's asking, are browser ad blockers like uOrigin recommended?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say again, there's always like a positive and a negative here. One of the best things is that they are going to help cut down on a lot of the cookie traffic, a lot of the storaging of that data. But it may slow things down for you. Certain features may break. So if you're not storing cookies, if it's not caching data, the website may be slower to load. Ads may not load. Videos may not load properly. But you are then protected from malicious ads, right? Things that you click and launch bad web pages. So there's pluses and minuses there. I think it's a great idea. You will see, it's really funny now. I've seen some websites that try to guilt you when you use an ad blocker. Like if you try to go to a news article, I have an ad blocker on my phone and it's like, hey, you're blocking ads. That means we don't get any revenue from the ad providers when you're reading us. Do you want to continue without supporting us for the free news we're giving you? And I'm like, wow, that's a pretty aggressive approach. But yes, I definitely want to read this without supporting your ad revenue. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'll make a donation at Christmas or something, right? So when you use the ad blocker, you're definitely enhancing your privacy. You're getting reduced security risk, but you may not be directly supporting content creators. You may not necessarily block all of the ads. There are still some that probably are going to pop up. If it's an ad blocker on like a native website that maybe Northwest Federal Credit Union has their own ads in their page, the ad blocker may not block their own ads because they're like living in the page versus being, pop-up things. So yeah, highly, highly recommend. And again, just look at who they are. But uBlock Origin is a really good one. AdBlock Plus is another privacy option. Privacy Badger is a good one. And there's also some browsers you can use that block ads for you. So Brave is a really good browser that helps to block a lot of that stuff and is more privacy oriented. And then DuckDuckGo is another one that can help with that.
Excellent. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to write down. Maybe you could send some of those in an email to me too, Jessica. And then what I will do is when the recording is ready to go and I'm ready to send that email out to all registrants, then I will include all of the resources that Jessica has given us, including her email and my email. So if you guys have any more questions after this, then you can address them then, or we can address them then. I think we don't have any more questions at this point. And yes, Dan, we will be sending all that out. And I think we're good. I don't see any other questions on the Q&A.
I'll get a PDF version of the slides as well to send out with that link. That way you guys have this documented as well if you need anything.
That would be great if I could include that. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for staying on. Okay, and now it is time for the raffle question. So I hope that you guys saw my little hint as Jessica was presenting to pay attention here. So the raffle question is, get your typing fingers ready, get the chat open to make sure that you can quickly type in the answer. All right, the raffle question is, what is doxing? Go. Let's see. Are we getting anyone? What do you think about Patrick's answer? He was the first.
Oh, let's see. Blackmailing someone with personal info for gain. I'm going to say not necessarily on that one, although that can be something that they do with it, but that is not quite. Let's see.
What about Jim's answer? I think that one sounds right.
Jim is a little bit closer. Yeah, giving personal information out. I think we're maybe missing a little bit there, but I will defer to you. Do you want me to put the definition for that one back up? Let's keep looking. A form of stalking.
Yeah, so
I would say that Janet here is probably the first one to get the whole piece, which is sending information out to a mass audience to wreak havoc or extort somebody.
Okay. All right. So it looks like we've got a clear winner. Janet Masters. Janet, I will, I have your email address from your registrations. Congratulations. Yay. So I will send you the $25 Visa gift card along with some other Northwest goodies, etc. In the mail. And I will be in contact via email. All right. This concludes our gathering today. Thank you guys so much for paying close attention. I know this was a lot of information, a lot of really great information. Don't be scared, like Jessica said. This is just to give you information, just to make sure that you're aware of what's going on. You don't click on links that you're not supposed to, etc. So again, if you have any more questions, I'll be sending the email out, and that will contain my email address as well as Jessica's. Please feel free to reach out. I know this is a very important topic, and we want to make sure that we stay on top of it, and especially also educate our children, right, and the young ones in our lives. So thank you again so much. And thank you, Jessica. It was awesome as always to be working with you. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Okay. And Rodrigo, I do see your question, and I can stay on real quick and answer that for you now. And then I can also send that in
Oh, okay. There was
in
another
the
question.
email. Yeah. So how do apps
Okay.
appear on our phones that we have not installed? So that can be super surprising and really concerning. But it can happen for a couple reasons, and a lot of those are not because you're doing anything wrong or because you've done anything risky or because anybody has access to your phone. Some phones, especially those that come from like specific manufacturers, if they're like cheaper smartphones, basically if it's not an iPhone or an Android device that's been provisioned by like one of the big three mobile carriers, right? They may come with pre-installed apps or what's called bloatware. So bloatware is something that kind of looks like games or maybe unnecessary software, and they may update and they may appear again and again after a system update or after a phone pushes an update. If you have automatic updates programmed on your phone, you may not even see that the phone updated, but you'll see these apps pop up. That's usually a pretty good indication that your phone just has annoying lifetime pre-installed bloatware and you just have to delete it every single time. You might be able to delete them as they come, like each individual time, or you may be able to just disable them. It kind of depends on the exact specifications and model of the phone as well as the app. Some other apps, like free ones or ones that maybe like you download them online or you save it as an app online instead of it coming from an authorized app store, could have free apps that download in conjunction with each other. So I know for a while there was like a free solitaire app that also downloaded and installed like a poker app and a casino app and a couple other things, and it like chain reacted those. Again, doesn't necessarily mean that like bad guys have access to your phone. They're just putting more advertising stuff on. And for those, if you delete one, you can then usually delete the rest and they should not reappear. You may also have things from the Google Play or the Samsung stores, or sometimes even from the Apple app stores that will auto install. I know that when I upgraded from the iOS 17 to iOS 18, it did an automatic push and put some other apps back on my phone that I did not want and that I deleted previously. So sometimes even the owners of those app stores can push that data. You could also have like family accounts linked. So if I have my watch linked to my phone, linked to my Mac, linked to my husband's Mac or something like that, right? If he downloads something and we have the setting turned on, it may share that across all of those devices. And then, of course, the bad option is that it could be malware, it could be something negative, and if that's the case, you definitely want to delete that again. But a quick search of what that app is, so you can Google search for stuff like that, and it'll usually tell you if it's just a bloatware and how you can get rid of it. For the most part, like that will solve 90% of your problems. Okay, and hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you so
I thought
much.
that was Rodrigo, but it was M. So hopefully that covered your question. And
That's
I'll put
okay.
some short stuff in the email out about that as well.
Sounds good. All right. And guys, I did see like some of the chat questions didn't appear until just now. So I apologize for not having gotten to them, but in the interest of time, we are going to conclude now. But please make sure that you send those questions via email, either to Jessica or myself, and we'll get you those answers. All right. Thanks again so much. And we will see you again soon.